All right, y'all, we have a sizable group and we have a lot of content today. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. And as more folks join, we will bring them into the conversation. But I am thrilled to have all of you here today for our recruiting and hiring expert hour, which is part of our Leading Edge After Survey Actions series. I am Dana Childress. I'm the Vice President on our Leading Places to Work team at Leading Edge. We know at this point, many of you all have been attending these After Survey Actions webinars. You've been looking at your survey results and you've been really thinking about ways that you can make meaningful progress on your results. And we know that that starts by having a fully hired team. And so we have heard from many, many folks that doing content related to recruiting and hiring would be really helpful as you think about assembling a really strong and effective team to do the meaningful work that your organizations do. I'm going to advance us in the slides here. Just to ground us on where we are, in June and July, we kicked off our after survey actions focused on engagement, understanding your data, thinking about ways to share your data with staff. That was our last session about 2 weeks ago. And so with August, we're kicking off our series on hiring and recruiting. And we know that this, again, is something that many people have been seeking guidance on. And two specific questions that pop up in the employee experience survey data are related to hiring processes being equitable. We had 67% say in the aggregate data that they see that their hiring processes are equitable, so definitely room for improvement. And 46% of respondents agreeing that there are enough people to do the work that we need to do. And so we know that people continue to feel really stretched. This was true prior to the pandemic, and it continues to be true now. And we know that people are being called to do their work in even kind of new and inventive ways and don't always feel like they have the staff to be able to do that. And so we're excited to talk today about just some foundational ways to think about structuring your recruiting and hiring processes. And I'm thrilled to be joined with actual experts, not me, from RCG Talent Solutions, who are going to share a lot of really great content today. It will be a bit more frontal. They have a lot of great things to share with you, but we certainly encourage you all to ask questions in the chat, and we're going to have some opportunities for interaction throughout. And just want to put a plug in too, at the end of our session, we are going to drop a feedback form. We are continuing to expand our offerings this year following the survey, and we hope that you all can give us some quick thoughts and feedback on what you took away from this session as we continue to strengthen our content for the future. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Liz and Angelica to take us through today's content.
Awesome. Thanks for the introduction, Dana. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to see you today. My name is Angelica Harris-Willie. I go by Ange. I'm a partner at RCG Talent Solutions and use pronouns she, her, hers. My professional background is in strategy, talent, and operations. I worked at Teach for America for 13 years doing that work, including executive talent recruitment, which I absolutely loved. And recently, about 2 years ago, moved over to RCG, where I get to work with a number of different organizations, helping them with talent acquisition work, and just absolutely love it. I'm also based in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And I'll pass it over to my colleague, Liz.
Thanks, Ange. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Liz Bainalo. I am based out of Chicago. I use she, her pronouns. My career trajectory is adjacent, but slightly different. So I started as a Teach for America core member, where I taught 7th grade math. And what I thought was going to be a 2-year program in St. Louis turned into almost 6 years because I co-founded my own scrappy startup nonprofit. And so when I think about wearing multiple hats of nonprofits, I've absolutely done that. Anything from trying to garner our donors and rally volunteers and hang drywall because we were renovating a building, you name it, I have probably worn that hat. And then in 2017, I made a transition to a national nonprofit and supported their rapid expansion. So it took an organization that was serving just 2 regions, Chicago and New York City. And over the course of 3.5 years, we expanded to 6 cities of service. And so I led the talent acquisition strategy of how and when to deploy that hiring process and recruiting the very best folks that we could. About 1.5 years ago, I transitioned to join this fantastic team at RCG and became Ange's colleague here, and really have just loved the landscape of being able to work with a wide range of clients and really addressing their individual needs. While recruitment has a lot of similarities, there's always interesting nuances, and that's been like the real joy of this work.
Great. So just to give a little bit of framing for our session today, I think Dana really put it together really well. Like hiring and recruiting is challenging from the time and effort it takes to actually do hiring well to the tight labor market where you're seeing more jobs than actual candidates. And we're actually the labor department is predicting that may last into 2030 to even then figuring out the processes and resources you'll need to that also both consider equity and your organizational culture at the same time. But it's impossible to hire. And our aim today is to really share some tips, best practices, and efficiencies to make hiring a little less challenging. And while we won't dive into the details, we do want to highlight and emphasize the importance of, for any organization, but especially mission-driven organizations, having a strong recruitment strategy. And a sound recruitment strategy is a plan that outlines your organization's approach to attracting and retaining talent, as well as hiring the right people and being in compliance from an HR standpoint. And with these three things in place, over time, hopefully you'll save time and money because you'll attract the right folks from the beginning and have them in seat. And hopefully with the right benefits, incentives, and cultural aspects in place, those folks will actually want to stay at your organization and not turn over in the long term. So again, while we won't go into details about the recruitment strategy, what we'll talk about today can help you define and or refine your recruitment and hiring approach moving forward. We also want to note that what we'll share today is not a one-size-fits-all approach either. We'll be offering different things to consider and potentially incorporate, whether they're new strategies or improving upon your existing strategies. And so when deciding if some of these strategies will actually be beneficial to your organization, you may want to consider things like the industry you're in, if your reputation within that industry, the size, and if you're growing or kind of like staying the same, what are your actual priorities and how does hiring and recruitment fit into those overall buckets? What is your budget? Are you allowed to like potentially take on some more bigger projects that may cost more money, or are you kind of like needing to be a little bit more conservative? Do you have the human capacity to actually do the work? Do you have the resources in place? That includes do you have scripts, surveys? Are those things already in place, or might you actually need to create them from scratch? And also the level of previous hiring experience that the person leading this work will actually has to be able to lead this work. So this will all impact your approach and how you decide what to pursue, what to hold on what you'll hold off on indefinitely. But before we actually go into the topics we'll check out today, would love to know from a raise of hands, and you can even use the reaction option in Zoom, how many people actually enjoy recruitment and hiring in their day-to-day jobs? Love to see it. I know there are a couple hands there, so love to see it. And then if a couple people don't mind, what's something that gets you really excited or maybe even gives you anxiety about recruitment and hiring?
So I said, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh yeah, I just love all aspects of recruiting, just from reviewing resumes to essentially phone screening candidates, and then obviously identifying those that might be a good fit for us. And I mean, I think just all aspects of it is just so thrilling, and up until obviously making an offer, you really have to just love every aspect of it from start to finish, to be quite frank. And I think that's what is so exciting, but also filling those positions and seeing people sort of thrive in their new roles. So for me, it's just from start to finish essentially is what really gets me going and what drives me when I like to call it headhunting.
Did anyone else want to share both exciting or things that give you anxiety or just concern?
Yeah,
Yep.
Something that gives me anxiety. I actually prefer to be the interviewee than the interviewer. I feel like it's just so hard to really know someone based on the process, and maybe I just haven't had good systems for hiring people, and I don't do hiring that often. But when I have, I openly admit have not made great hires.
Thank you for sharing that, both Elizabeth and David. Yeah, I mean, I think there are some things that are really exciting about hiring, and definitely some things, if you're newer, or even if I've done this for years, there's still some things I'm just like, oh, like, is there a different way of doing this, or just a different approach? So you're not alone in that. But thank you again, both, for sharing. And I'll pass it over to Liz to kind of like walk us through our topics and take a little bit further.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for passing it along. So to cover, quickly, what we're mostly going to talk about today is really understanding your why in hiring. What are the things that you should be considering before you even go out on the market? And then thinking about, how does diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, DEIB, make an appearance in your hiring and recruitment process and beyond? What are the things that you should be considering to build strong, diverse, qualified pools and pipelines? Is your organization using an applicant tracking system? If not, what are some things that you should be considering as you think about advancing to that stage? And what are the drawbacks in either case? And lastly, we will talk a little bit about how and when to leverage a talent firm. If you either have your own internal team and you just need some added capacity, or you don't have an internal team and you just need kind of more robust support, we'll talk about the different ways to leverage a firm. And then we'll open up to questions. That's going to cover our day today. All right, so before you begin hiring, you should be really clear on the reasons behind why you think you need a new person to join your team, and make sure you're hiring for the right reasons. So first, there are kind of 3 key things that I would urge you to think about when you're considering bringing someone new to the team. What's the why? Is it that there's a staffing capacity issue? Is there too much work for any one individual or teams? Is your organization growing? Do you have a distinct and urgent project that needs to be tackled right away? Or alternatively, are there work inefficiencies? Are there actually processes or systems that are making the work harder or unnecessarily more time consuming to get through? Sitting with that information, answering those questions will tell you, do I just need to improve systems? Do I actually need another FTE? Or do I need a part-time person? Do I need someone just in the temporary lens? It will really help you determine how you want to maneuver moving forward. Once you determine, okay, I'm interested and bringing somebody onto the team, now you want to be very clear on what is the outcomes and responsibilities of the person you're bringing on. What are the goals and metrics that you're going to use to measure success? Is this work sustainable? Making sure that you are giving them enough work if it's a full-time job, but you're not giving them enough work that it's 2 or 3 people's jobs. Being really mindful about the work stream that you're creating for this next role. And then you want to really think about, what's the level of that support? Do you need them full-time, part-time? Is it a contractor role for just a temporary program? And so sitting with how much does a person need to be on board to get your goals and objectives met? And lastly, really making sure that you are aligning the role with your organization's values and goals. Take time to consider, what is your organization's proposition value? You are asking something of someone else to bring to your team. What are you offering them in return? That includes things like compensation, benefits, work-life balance. Is it a hybrid role? Is it work remote? Are they required to stay late or come in early? What are the trade-offs as you think about what you are offering this person and what you are asking in return? The better the proposition, the more likely you're going to get people to buy into wanting to work for your organization. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that can look like. But now you're at the point where you're like, okay, I know I definitely need a new hire. How does DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, come into play in your recruitment process and beyond? We know that DEIB have important concepts and practices that together really support in creating an inclusive, equitable work environment that allows and encourages people to not only want to join your organization, but stay in your organization. So organizations with DEIB practices are more likely to attract and retain staff, people.
It's not like this. So let's say this is the original one.
You're off mute. Please stay on mute and use the chat feature just in case. Circling back, so organizations with DEIB practices are more likely to attract and retain staff, meaning people who see themselves in the staff or have similar life experiences often results in just having a more inclusive and feeling like they belong in that setting. Additionally, by increasing that diversity, you increase innovation. Different perspectives see things from different angles, which ultimately results in improved decision-making, solutions to problems and issues. And having those diverse opinions allow for a diversity of thought and improved processes and solutions. Lastly, it does increase staff satisfaction. Staff who feel they belong and are valued are far more likely to enjoy their role and organization and are willing to promote it. And we'll talk about having your staff be ambassadors as they are. In the appendix of this presentation, you'll also get some academic articles from 2015 to 2022 on the importance and advantages of DEIB in the workplace. I'm curious for you all, what are some things that you've either heard of organizations doing or that you're actually doing yourself to promote an equitable hiring or recruitment process? Feel free to use the chat or come off mute. Yeah, the question is, are there any strategies that you've either heard of and or are actually implementing to try to have an equitable recruitment or selection process? Need a couple of good things in the chat. Love hiring committees, panels. Oh, that's great, Sarah. That's fantastic. Thanks for those who are sharing in the chat.
Liz, do you mind sharing? Because I can't actually see the chat. Do you mind sharing some of those things?
Absolutely. So some things that have come up are using hiring committees to mitigate biases. Someone's HRIS system blocks out the candidate's name until the hiring managers move them to an interview status. Other folks are asking, their teams not to do a social media or LinkedIn dive and really, making assessments just based off their baseline candidate profile. Having meetings with hiring managers prior to have clear understanding and expectations of roles and necessary skills. Post-interview rubrics before the hiring committee debriefs. Yes, absolutely. And the HRIS system was Paylocity. Oh, and one of your tips, Ange, which is anonymous exercises. Awesome. Thanks to those who are sharing. Examining the candidate experience process from application to offer stages is something that we strongly encourage you to do. For many people, engaging with your recruitment process will be their first and formal introduction to your organization and can make or break their opinion regardless of the outcome of their hiring process. Make it a great experience for candidates to look forward to future opportunities in case this one doesn't work out. You may or may not be doing some items from the next slide, but so be intentional about setting goals, tracking them, and making progress on what needs to be made. And be patient. Everyone needs to move at the right speed for your own organization. So let's dive into some of those strategies. So first, ensure that candidates can see themselves reflected at your organization. Organization reputation is major. Our current and former staff members, people who have been through your hire, or other people who have been through your hiring process, especially those from underrepresented backgrounds, I think recommending your organization as a place to build a career or take a role. Is your organization truly a welcoming and inclusive workplace? Do you know the answer to that? Have you asked staff members? Have you done any surveys to see what feedback they're getting? Sometimes just one individual perspective isn't quite enough. And so really taking time to get to know your staff and see, is this the environment you're hoping to create one that's actually living out in practice? Every staff member is a recruiter and ambassador of your organization. How they engage with others and talk about your organization to family, friends, or even strangers can have an impact of recruiting and hiring efforts. We've linked an article about this concept called collaborative recruiting that shares additional information about this topic in the appendix. You'll get this at the end. The next part is reducing barriers for candidates to apply. You want to make sure that your job description is an accurate reflection of your organizational culture and values. Consider, are you having any biased language in your job descriptions, whether it's gender coding, ageism, ableism, nativism? Do you have any unnecessary requirements like a degree certification or needing to lift a certain amount of weight? Is a cover letter actually necessary for this role? Now, we get it for roles that are writing intensive, like a fundraising or development type role. But could you also have a targeted short answer question to get you more pertinent information? So again, making sure that every step of your application, you haven't even talked to candidates yet, but just making sure that every step of your application is intentional, that you're putting the questions because you really do need to vet that particular answer. Not addressing these items could potentially cost you candidates applying to roles that they are qualified for and would otherwise be interested. We've seen in the chat that some folks have switched to short answer questions instead of full-on cover letters, and that also makes it easier for the hiring committees. Love that. Yeah, there's a question about why cover letters have been going out of style. I mean, there's a few different reasons, and I think it depends on who you chat with. But one thing that I would say for sure is recruitment is a labor of love, and reading whole page cover letters is quite time consuming and taxing and may not actually be necessary for the role itself. Now, you may want to capture a sample of writing, but that can often be done in just a short answer question rather than having someone do a formal drawn out cover letter. Additionally, the information that's in a cover letter is often covered in your very first, info call if you're able to do that. And so again, wanting to be really intentional about what you're asking of folks when you're asking of it. Is that cover letter truly going to be used to evaluate and weed people out, or could you actually do that later? From the candidate perspective, it's also very time consuming on their end. Folks who are on the job market are often applying to lots of jobs. And so they might see your role and they're really excited about it, but it requires a cover letter. And so I'm just going to put that on the back burner. I'm going to come back to that job to apply to later because I'm going to go through and apply to the ones that have a potentially less barrier in terms of time to apply. So just things to consider. Great. So in terms of DEI best practices in recruitment, first, you really want to be intentional about diverse sourcing. And we'll get into this a bit more in the next section. But when you're getting started thinking about what am I going to do to ensure that I am pulling in a diverse and qualified pool. Next, taking time, if you're able to, track your EEOC data and having some metrics. Do you want to shoot for a certain percentage of your pools to be a certain amount of BIPOC representation, or a certain, gender representation, to make sure that you're increasing the diversity to your team and staff. The next is in your interviewers, leveraging diverse interviewers. Again, making sure that your folks, being your candidates, can see themselves in a diverse interview panel. You should also be considering providing anti-bias training to those interviewers, whether it's one interviewer or multiple interviewers, making sure that you're taking time before their interview to talk about what anti-bias training can look like. Last is gathering independent feedback and really avoiding that groupthink. We often do that in the form of a post-interview survey that is done without talking to your colleagues first. You complete your interview, you do your feedback, and then we can use that data to have a competency-based debrief at the end of the process. Lastly, in hiring, so using competency-based interview approach, meaning that your questions align to the competencies that you've identified before you even started the search. You did that initial planning to say, this is all the core competencies that would result in success for this role. And I'm going to ask questions along the way that always come back to those competencies that we aligned on. Consider the use of an honorarium or previous work sample. At RCG, we use honorariums to compensate folks when a particular stage asks them to create a work product that is outside of their scope of work, and because they're creating something new, we want to make sure that they are compensated for their time, effort, and thoughts that they're providing to us. And lastly, we highly suggest do not conduct backdoor reference checks. With few exceptions, don't reach out to check references with anyone the candidate has not expressly given permission to do so. There's a few reasons. Candidates may want to keep their search confidential. There may be an unfair bias that can be introduced by bringing someone else into the fold. All of us probably have had people who've loved working with us and someone who maybe not so much. And so give candidates the opportunity and the respect to offer references and the context that puts things into perspective. And lastly, reference checks really shouldn't be used as evaluative aspects of the interviewing, but more as confirmation what you've learned throughout the process itself. You are already intending to make an offer. And so this reference check is really about how do you set them up for success. And we'll also share a document regarding our policies and processes for reference checks.
All right. So our next topic around building strong, diverse pools and pipelines is a hot topic. I think we'd get a good question in the registration about this. But before we dig into it, I would love to have a poll. I think, Leah, can you pull that poll up? And it's just around folks being able to answer, what strategies have you used to build strong, diverse candidate pools and pipelines? I'm going to take about 20 seconds to answer. So we definitely have some trends here. Lots of people using job boards, career websites, posting to LinkedIn, where we see a number of people applying nowadays, employee referrals. And we'll talk a little bit about application tagging and ATS data mining, because that is a big thing that we've been doing a lot at RCG. So happy to talk a little bit through that. So I'm going to end this poll and we'll dig in. So we think about this in two different ways when it comes to building a diverse, I'll share the results in case people can't see it. Can people see that? I'm sorry if you didn't see that response to the poll. All right. So we think about building diverse pools in two different ways. One being about more immediate needs, roles that are kicking off fairly soon, and maybe you just don't have a pool built up just yet. So some things to consider First is to really understand what are the competencies you're looking for, the skills, qualifications, and values that you'll need in the person entering the role to really be successful. We often create personas that include really thinking about where might this person come from, what are the really like nice to haves versus must haves for the role, whether that be around like management, what kind of expertise are they bringing to the table, years of experience, things along those lines. Really thinking through where might this person currently work or where have they worked in the past, to really kind of like bring about a list of organizations we might be able to tap to look for previous employees who may match the profile. Also considering what are current roles this person might be in or past roles that may be a stepping stone to the role we're trying to hire for. And then also considering like what are some like professional organizational connections that this person may be associated with. Maybe they're licensed clinical social workers, or maybe they're certified fundraising professionals, looking for ways where you might find connections to other organizations where you might find that person in the skill set that you're looking for. And then you can use those personas to actually build out Boolean strings to actually like look for folks on like LinkedIn, maybe even Handshake, which is more for like your Gen Zers who are just coming into the economy. And then posting the role widely. Of course, you want to make sure you're posting to your career website. If you have a newsletter of any sort, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, it really just making sure that your role is shared as widely as possible to get in front of the right people, whether that person is your actual hire or someone who may know your person. Online job boards and websites are also a place where we spend a lot of our time and energy, making sure that we're searching both for free and paid job sites. But the most important thing, because there's no one size fits all for any particular role, but really understanding like what is the focus of that job board, and really making sure that's aligned with the actual profile and person you want to attract to the role. So what sector are you in? What is the type of role? Is it operations versus finance versus fundraising? The seniority of the role, there are some websites that are much more targeted towards folks who are at the VP level and above, and other sites that are much more targeted for entry level or mid-level candidates. And then there are also some sites where you can actually target based on location. So if you are a national organization or even international, being able to post more, and you have remote options, being able to post remotely, or if someone needs to be in a certain location, being able to really hone in on where that person may be and getting it in front of them. Employee referrals are also a big thing. I mean, I think the statistic is almost like 80% of people get hired through employee referrals. And so being able to leverage your staff to ask for those referrals of qualified candidates is important. While also weighing, like, depending upon, if there's like, if you're trying to diversify your staff in any way, considering like what is the makeup of your staff and how much might you want to kind of like balance that against other strategies you might employ. I know at Teach for America, when we tried a new employee referral system, we tried offering things like swag. People love hats, T-shirts, like little things that don't cost a lot of money. They're very excited about it. And then we know of some organizations that do offer like monetary compensation if that referral sometimes results in a hire. So there are different ways to like think about employee referrals and actually getting people engaged. But again, I think for employees who really love working where they do and really enjoy their jobs, are more than likely willing to offer to suggest people more often than not. And then lastly, doing network mapping and partnerships. We work with organizations to really help them understand, like, if this person may come from within their own network, how do we help them like map out where this person may come from? So actually having people sit down and like look through their LinkedIn, understanding the profile, and actually saying, oh, I actually know this person, they went to this organization, and being able to map those people, those connections, and then also helping them with the language and outreach that they may actually use to like reach out to a friend or an acquaintance on LinkedIn or through email, but just really helping people help you in hiring and setting them up for success from the beginning. You may also have partners that you work with in your work who may send out job or career newsletters or share opportunities through other means. And so being able to connect with them about those opportunities to share them more broadly is also a really great opportunity. For times when you maybe know about a role that's upcoming and maybe it's a couple months out, or you just know, like, we're going to be hiring for this, but it's just not an immediate need, there are some things to consider. So one of the things we talked about was like data mining, or at least being able to review, previously submitted employee referrals or applications. I think sometimes there's a treasure trove of people who you may just have passed over before because they just weren't a match for that particular role. And one of the ways to actually think about doing that to come back to those folks is to implement a tagging system. So that you might actually have tags if you're getting an email system to create, like if you have Gmail, you can create little tags to say, oh, this person might be, more aligned with operations work or finance work. So having those tags, you can actually easily pull them up and reference them to understand, okay, who do I actually already know who I might want to come back to in the future. And then if time permits, you can also conduct selective informational interviews to just learn more about candidates of interest. Folks you choose to prioritize, maybe people who are more aligned with roles that are upcoming, roles that you actually may hire for more often, but just maybe don't have it open currently, or someone who just like on paper looks like they could be have really great expertise or experience that may benefit your organization. And I think even if you don't have a role, I think prospects are usually really appreciative of actually just getting to know someone at the organization. And it's not to give them a leg up in the process, but it's just more to understand who is this person, what will they bring to the table? And if a role does open up, we have someone who we could quickly at least have a more in-depth conversation once we're ready to actually move into a hiring process. And then if your organization doesn't regularly have like a newsletter or some type of communication with potential prospects, would also consider just making sure like in your calendar, just marking off, maybe there are certain checkpoints, like every 3 to 4 months, you might want to check on that person to understand like, hey, how are you doing? Maybe to see if anything's changed in their life, if they're like, really top talent that you really want to continue to bring into the organization. So we're going to spend a couple minutes talking. I'm sorry, were there any questions there? I can't see the chat, so I want to make sure I didn't miss anything if there were any questions there.
And mostly just chatter about finding folks and some interest in if when we send the follow-up materials, we can include some suggested sites, which I have some lists too, of just places to help expand people's reach that they might not be thinking about now.
Totally, can happy to do that. So on to the applicant tracking system utilization. I mean, every organization is, can be at a different place. Some organizations don't use an ATS at all, and some have very formalized systems that include like customer relationship management. So I think we're going to do another poll now and just get a sense for like what kind of applicant tracking systems are people currently using on this call. Just 1 second to get that running.
Sorry, are you seeing the poll now?
Let me
No.
No.
Let me try something else.
Oh,
How about now?
it came up. Yay.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. I thought you could see it.
So people just want to take about 20 seconds to fill this in. Show this on my screen so people can see in real time. So it seems like a lot of people aren't currently using an ATS, and some people who do have an applicant tracking system. And again, like people and organizations are all different places in their ATS usage. And so we'll talk a little bit about each of these 4 places and some things that we learned along the way, because we've seen a little bit of everything from our clients as well as our own experience. So depending on your organization's age or growth plans, application volume, budget, et cetera, you may, you just may again be at different places. But regardless of the ATS that you're using or not using, there are a lot of things that you can consider to just make your life a little bit more easy and efficient to find candidates. So if you don't have an ATS, you might be using like an email system or an Excel sheets or tracker. And if not, maybe this might be a way to think about how you might employ those things to make your life easier moving forward. If you're using an email, you might see that you can create, again, we talked about creating job tags, or we can create that within your own email system, or if you are using some type of an Excel sheet, adding a column that you can actually quickly either create a drop down list to actually like pinpoint this person's a right fit for operations and finance roles or other big bucket areas where your organization does work. And that again will make it easier for you to identify talent pretty quickly. There's also the option of, if you're receiving your applications through email, doing a quick transferring housing of information into a filterable spreadsheet like a Google Sheets. Include things like name, state, email, things that are really going to help you like kind of like whittle down up to a smaller list of people you may want to reach out to for future roles. And another thing you may consider is, if you're in Google, using like a Google survey to actually capture your application information. So again, then you'll get uniform information across the board versus just a resume from folks potentially. You can ask those short answer questions, have people upload their resume, but again, just putting everything in one spot for you as you think about reviewing candidates and making decisions about how to move people forward. You can even create columns around like, we've moved this person to this stage, taking any notes in one place as well. If you're using a database tracker, and RCG has to RCG used a database for a very long time before we moved into using an applicant tracking system. And so some of the things that we learned and with that database, we used Airtable, was around being able to create customized applications for each role. So we could customize the questions. We work with different clients on being able to actually put their information at the top of a application itself. But again, like you can really customize it to really capture for each individual role with things that you want to understand about a candidate. You can build out a confidential EEOC survey to really understand who's actually applying to your role and keep responses confidential so it's not tied to that person when you're actually going to review their information. And then would also say, while you can't, we use this Airtable as a applicant tracking system. And while I think it does have a lot of similarities, there are definitely some differences and limitations. Some of them include the potential, like, there's a lack of seeing communication all in one space. We had to continue to use our emails. And so if someone sent an email, there wasn't an easy way to like see, what had been sent to a candidate. So again, some drawbacks, but again, if you're looking for something that will keep information all in one spot, as far as your candidate information, a database tracker may be the way to go. For those who have applicant tracking systems with or without a CRM, definitely make sure you're using like those built-in automations for things like rejections. The only exception to using that automatic rejection is for finalists in your processes. We really think that people who've spent that much time and energy in your process should get a more personalized response as they're being exited. There's also a way in some of the systems right now to actually automate filtering out candidates who don't meet a minimum bar. So say like you need someone to like be able to travel or be located in a certain spot. You can ask a short application question. If they answer in a certain way, they'll automatically get rejected. And so again, like just choose wisely in terms of what questions you want to put in that bucket. There are a lot of AI features in ATSs now. I think they do a lot of incredible things. I think the thing to really think about, though, is that there are still limitations to what AI can do. These systems are being built by humans. All humans have bias. And so thinking about how do those different features help you or hinder you. So don't be afraid to ask questions, interrogate some of the things that are being offered to you and being provided by AI. But again, something you should definitely be exploring, because I do think there are some definite added benefits to saving you time and energy. And I also did link a article about from a psychology magazine around some automation bias and AI and how to like really help your organization and yourself think through that. Another big thing is just like as your organization matures or just decides to take on different type, either an entirely new ATS or switching ATSs, You might also want to consider, putting together a diverse group of stakeholders who will interact with the platform, whether it be your IT team who's helping on the back end, your recruiters, HR, marketing teams, to like really help make sure you're gathering feedback on like how the things that you'll need to think about as you implement that system to ensure your organization gets the most out of that new platform, and you're minimizing any unseen issues that may come up as you're thinking about implementing it. So we'll talk a little bit about when and how to leverage talent firms. Before that, Dana, no questions before I move on?
No questions. So I think we can open it up after you finish the section.
Awesome. So we'll talk a little bit about leveraging talent firms. As you know, Liz and I both work at RCG Talent Solutions, and we're really about matching talent with mission-driven organizations so they can really create impact together. And to that, Liz will start talking a little bit more about our work.
So one of the main features that we provide at RCG is our signature search, which is kind of your nuts and bolts, support with any search from entry level to executive C-suite. We're supporting from drafting a job description to getting it posted, supporting the sourcing, creating the design process, making sure you have the scripts that are competency aligned, your post-interview surveys, getting all the way to the final stage of supporting you to submit an offer to your right candidate. And so it's a full comprehensive search.
On the embedded side, we provide like an hourly flexible support and expertise to really like plug in where you need support with your searches, whether that be with like sourcing, screening, coordinating interviews, but it's really about creating capacity for you and your team. And given its flexibility, it's really great for organizations who may already have a talent acquisition practice in place, or for smaller teams looking to place like non-leadership roles and may just need additional support on like the front end or back end of their process. We also offer fractional capacity, where it's again just providing extra hands when you need to move work forward. It's usually ideal for organizations who have a temporary contractor need and really want to fill in some gaps, whether it becoming like an HR, finance, maybe when people on your team may be going out sabbatical or taking temporary leaves, and maybe you don't want to invest in a full-time or part-time person because the work may also like ebb and flow.
And lastly, we have an expert advisory. And so if your organization is a place where you just need someone who has expertise in a particular function, whether that's development, HR, recruiting, or what have you, we're going to support in matching you with an expert advisor to provide you with that experience and knowledge to get you over the hump that you might be facing at your organization.
And so we're going to talk a little bit about just if you're considering working with an external talent firm, what are some of the things that you might want to think about and consider?
So overall, when your organization might need, consultation on some or all aspects of recruitment strategy or hiring processes, when you are looking for a robust and vetting search process, when your organization needs capacity support. So those are some things that you might need. Then when you might want to engage a talent firm, and then how to engage those firms. You want to vet firms, whether that's RCG or any firm that you're looking at. You want to take time to get to know them, make sure that there's alignment with them. And so you can do free exploratory calls to ensure that the service matches your needs, confirm cost of service, making sure that it is budget friendly to what your organization can make happen. And lastly, that the organization that you're proposing to work with is a fit for your organization and the working style. Ask lots of questions. You're paying for a service, so make sure that it is absolutely the right fit. And you can also ask for client references as well. All of these components combined together will make sure that if you are going to spend the time and resources on engaging with a talent firm, that you are getting the best bang for your buck and ultimately resulting in supporting your needs.
So we've shared a ton of information. So we have a couple minutes. If folks have any questions, we're happy to answer them here.
Right, I have more of a comment. I'm sorry, I was thinking, Elizabeth, a little bit about your thoughts about re-engaging candidates who may have applied in the past and have sort of, ventured on. And it's probably more of a comment too, but please obviously chime in if you will. But if we're going to be doing re-engaging candidates that have applied in the past, I would imagine rethinking the quote unquote rejection letters, because that language sometimes isn't delivered well. Thank you for application, but we've moved on. But oftentimes you see that not said so well. So if you're going to re-engage candidates, wouldn't it be prudent to really rethink the language for those who didn't quite meet the criteria at a particular time? That's a comment. I think we need to rethink attitudes surrounding how we're saying thank you for your application. Because if you're going to go back into that pipeline, because they should still be considered as human capital, they might not want to bother because that rejection email was not worded with sensitivity. Can you sort of speak to that? I'm a big proponent of thinking about how you're thoughtfully saying thank you, but we are moving on. Because you're right, you have to bridge that gap so that you can leverage that pool of people that didn't quite necessarily meet your criteria at that particular time. But as somebody said earlier, they may actually meet your criteria for a new requisition. Those are my thoughts, but I'm not sure how you would encourage that, because I think you're right, that is an area that could be leveraged, and perhaps rethinking the wording and how we're delivering the thank you but no thanks message. Can you speak to that a bit?
I have some quick thoughts on that, Elizabeth. I think you're bringing up a really great point, and I would even differentiate, when is it appropriate for just an email and fixing up that language, and when is it appropriate for actually extending a phone call? Did this person make it to a semi-finalist or a finalist round? Are they late stages and being rejected? Making sure that you are honoring their experience, because yes, they are, potential future employees, but they're also humans, and it does not feel great to be rejected from anything. And so really taking the time to make that phone call, as uncomfortable as it may be, because you are honoring their experience and the amount of time and effort they've put into your process thus far. The best case scenario is that somebody receives that rejection, is obviously disappointed, and is so eager for the next opportunity that comes up to throw their hat in the ring. And I think that comes to exactly what you were saying, which is just being really thoughtful about the language. So if it's an early stage, I think an email is still appropriate. I think it's out of line to think that you're going to call every single candidate that you reject. But in the early stages, an email, and softening that language, taking time to really soften, what does that sound like to the person who's on the receiving end of that, that language? And even say, while this wasn't the right opportunity, we look forward to keeping in touch should the right opportunity come along. And, we'd be happy to, tap you on the shoulder, something along those lines. Likewise, if you're making that phone call towards a later stage rejection, just being really thoughtful about how that's going to come across so that they still would be really eager to be a part of your process in the future.
Good question. I have time for one more question.
Sorry, I'm going to just ask one more, forgive me. Are we going to be receiving this presentation by email? That would be great if we could be able to reference that. I really thought this was excellent. So will you be emailing this to us, may I ask? I hope that wouldn't be the last question in case somebody else.
Yes, yes, Elizabeth, we'll send it out most likely tomorrow with recording, and they have some really great resources in the appendix too that they referenced today, so this will be there to dig in also.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh, great. I'll do some quick next steps and close out. And then certainly if there are other questions, you all please feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll capture the chat. So quickly, first, I just want to express a ton of gratitude to Angela. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us and so much of what you have learned. I didn't share this at the beginning, but I had the good fortune to work with Angelica for many years. And so I have watched her work on some very, very challenging searches and always blew me away with her ability to uncover amazing talent and for people to speak really highly about the process, whether or not they were selected, which I think really just reflects back what Elizabeth was just sharing. Like we want people to be able to really tell the story about their hiring experience, whether or not they ultimately got the job. And I think there are ways to do that that really honor humanity and people's strengths and talents. And so just feel grateful to have learned from you both. Ask that you all share feedback with us. Leah dropped in the chat just a quick feedback form. Again, we have a couple more sessions related to hiring, even just in this month for the next couple of weeks. So we would love to get your feedback to make sure that we give you content that's going to feel really relevant as you act on your survey results. The 2 sessions coming up, one is next Wednesday, August 16th, which is on building your team. That is going to be kind of a lessons from leading edge as we have expanded our own team and tried to put some of what Angela shared into practice for our own hiring processes. So we'll share a bit. You'll hear from our Chief Operating Officer, Morty Walfish, and he'll share a bit about what we have learned and some of the things that we are attempting to do better as we grow. And then the last one before we head into the holidays is going to be a peer consultancy, where if you are working on a tough search or you have a specific hiring challenge, we ask that you bring that. That will be a participatory session where we will get into small groups and actually work through some of our challenges directly. And you can sign up for all of those on the webpage that Leah just dropped in the chat. And finally, I feel really excited to share that Ange and Liz have agreed to do a couple of just short mini Q&A sessions with a number of organizations who are focused on whether it's like a specific search or help. I want to do the work to create a more robust and diverse pipeline, but I've already posted in all these places and I'm still struggling. So if you have a specific challenge, whether it's about one role or several of your roles in hiring practices, we invite you to sign up for one of a handful of limited sessions, and we'll share the information to sign up for those when we send out these resources, most likely tomorrow. And that will again include the recording and the slide deck. And then Ange and Liz, I think you've got your information in here too. Yes, perfect.
Yeah, so thanks again for having us. Really enjoyed it, our time together today. And if you would like to learn more about RCG, our website's there, as well as either reach out to Liz or myself if you have any questions as well. Thank you.